Dr. Victor Gao, thank you very much for joining us. Mr. Gao, a very happening week in China has just concluded, where China was the center of attraction for hosting SCO summit, followed by a victory parade. Now, during these events, President Xi spoke about the world having choice between peace and war. But at the same time, China also exhibited its massive military power. So tell us what sort of a message China wanted to send to the world.
Yes, indeed. On September the 3rd, China held the grandest military parade in human history, not only in terms of the scale of the parade, but also in terms of the most sophisticated military weapons, including hardware, software, including conventional weapons, as well as nuclear weapons, and all kinds of missiles, including intercontinental missiles. And of particular importance, China also displayed the most sophisticated, the never heard of drones and the robotics, for example. Now, the underlying message is amazingly very, very obvious. This is a message for peace, because I think the history will look back upon the victory parade as a major turning point in human history, because the rest of the world will come to the conclusion that no country in the world will ever indulge in the fantasy of imposing a war on China, conventional war or nuclear war, because China will not be crushed. China will overwhelm the enemy if it dares to impose a war on China. It is also a demonstration of China's commitment to defending peace for mankind, meaning, as President Xi Jinping said, we are faced with a choice between war versus peace, of multilateralism versus, for example, bullying by one country against the rest of the world. So China is to be recognized as the major force for defending world peace and for defending free trade. So this is the message from China, and I hope all countries in the world will realize that you need to come to terms with China, whether you like it or not, and you will be able to solve any problems with China in peace, in negotiation, in diplomacy, rather than agitating for war.
Right. So China's desire globally is to compete with other countries rather than confrontation.
Actually, no one can really seriously compete with China, if I'm allowed to say, because China's growth is inevitable. Whether there is, for example, the United States or any other countries, whether they like it or not, China will continue to grow. I don't think China's growth is a competition with any other country in itself. China follows this peaceful engagement. We treat all countries in the world as an equal. And we do not want to, for example, dictate our terms, holding a gun at the head of other countries, and try to rule above other countries or to manhandle other countries. In that sense, China is completely different from many other countries which want to dominate the rest of the world. And China believes in multipolarity and multilateralism, which is not really, in the substance, is not competition itself. It's mutually beneficial growth. The real free trade is for mutual benefit, rather than for unilateral benefit, and by forcing terms onto other countries. So I would say China wants to cooperate with other countries, as well as, for example, living in peace and promoting win-win cooperation and win-win benefits.
Now there's a lot of discussion on some pictures and footages from these events. First, where President Xi, President Putin, and Prime Minister Modi were standing together, and then in one of the footages, we saw President Kim Jong walking with President Xi and President Putin. Now, many are referring to this as a new world order led by China to counter the bullying from US and President Trump, to be specific. Is that the case?
Well, I tend to disagree. Yes, indeed, Prime Minister Modi of India attended the SCO summit meeting in Tianjin. And not only Prime Minister Modi was there, the Pakistani Prime Minister, His Excellency, was also there, together with about 24 heads of states of SCO members, including, for example, President of Turkey. And Prime Minister Modi didn't make it to the parade in Beijing, which is not too much of a deal. But the distinguished Pakistani Prime Minister was here on the Tiananmen Gate, reviewing the troops together with, again, 27 heads of state and heads of government in total. So I don't think, you need to be very selective and zoom in only on, for example, President Xi Jinping of China, President Putin of Russia, and the paramount leader, Mr. Kim of the PRK. No, if you really want to be objective, right, you need to see that either at the SCO summit, about 24 heads of states, heads of government were there, or during the victory parade, again, more than 27 heads of states, heads of government in total were on the gateway. And in addition, there were thousands of deputy prime ministers, foreign ministers, and ministers of all kinds from many countries.
Yeah.
And altogether, about 180 countries were represented in reviewing the troops, including senior diplomats from the U.S. Embassy and almost for all the NATO member states. So don't be selective. Focus on the totality of it and really be very objective in looking at that.
Yeah,
China's
but
victory
Mr. Gao,
parade is celebration of mankind's victory against fascism.
Right. Mr. Gao, although you disagree with this, but looking at it from U.S. perspective, you must have seen the tweet of President Trump. He was very upset. He thanked China also. He sent warmest regards for President Putin and President Kim Jong. But he also said that these countries are conspiring against U.S. So clearly he was very upset about it.
Yeah, my comment is very simple. Why shouldn't President Trump say, well, the three heads of states of these three countries, together with all the other, for example, 23, 24 other countries, were gathered here in Beijing talking about how to promote better relations with the United States? Why should he jump to the gun and say, well, they are conspiring against me, against the United States? Why should any country in the world really conspire against the United States? It is a great country. It's a big country, very strong military power. I just hope the United States, under President Trump, will really behave and will honor free trade and will not hold a gun at any other's head, and will not force other countries to weaponize anything. Peace between China and the United States, peace between the United States and the rest of the world will be a better world, rather than, for example, handling any other country or try to impose rule of the law on the rest of the world.
So there's no attempt by China to make a new bloc against US, and other countries like Russia, Iran, North Korea will be part of this bloc. So China is not leading the world into a new world order and a new bloc.
Allow me to make one very important point. The international order we are living in through was established back in 1945. Now, from the very beginning, the founding fathers of the international order established in 1945 did not anticipate for a unipolar world. It was meant to be multipolar to start with. Just look at the composition of the Security Council of the United Nations with 5 permanent member states, each with a veto power. That means from the very beginning, the United Nations Security Council was not meant for one country to dictate terms to other permanent member states. It was meant to be a multipolar world. Now, in the subsequent decades, one country thought that it became the sole polarity in the world. It wanted to dictate its terms, but that is against the original intent of the founding of the United Nations, the international order we are still living in through. Therefore, what China wants to do is not to recreate a new world order. No, it is going back to the original intent. The world, which was meant to be multipolar, should remain multipolar. Right. And no country should be allowed to change the rule of the game and to dictate its terms to other countries, to hold a gun at the head of other countries. That is China's intent. China wants to maintain the international order we are living through as originally structured and intended in 1945, after we collectively defeated Nazi Germany and defeated the Japanese fascism. And we should never allow rearmament of Japan, for example, or rearmament of Germany we should never allow Japan to develop and possess weapons of mass destruction. If they want to do that, that is against the original intent of the founding fathers of the international order we are still living through. So
right.
China does not want to rock the boat. China wants to maintain the international order as we understand it collectively for mankind as a whole.
Dr. Gao, interestingly, Indian Prime Minister Mr. Modi also participated in SCO summit, and this was his first visit to China after 7 years. And not to forget that only weeks ago, Indian officials and their media were blaming China for helping Pakistan in war against India. So how do you view this visit? Can India be trusted by China, or did India just use this opportunity as a leverage against US and Trump administration?
Now, we all know that China and Pakistan are ironclad brothers and sisters. And I've said on major Indian televisions that no one in India should really second guess China's commitment to help Pakistan to defend its legitimate interest, including defending its sovereignty and territorial integrity. What China wants to see in Indian subcontinent is every country should respect each other, should respect each other's sovereignty and territorial integrities. And if there are any differences, for example, involving territorial disputes, we all solve them in peaceful ways rather than rushing to get guns and shoot at each other. Is that right? So in that sense, I think India's allegations are unfounded. China wants to have good relations with India. Whatever we can do to put the territorial dispute between China and India behind us should be a good step in the right direction. And China will always remain as an ironclad friend and brother or sister with people in Pakistan. These two things do not conflict with each other. I think the ironclad friendship between China and Pakistan is actually a major stabilizing force to prevent any deterioration of the situations on the Indian subcontinent. I even said after the Indian-Pakistani aerial battle that India should not even attempt to weaponize water in the Indus River, because I say, don't do unto others what you don't want others to do unto you, because India, after all, is a midstream country. If a midstream country wants to weaponize water against country and people in the downstream, then beware the upstream country, in this case China, may do the same thing and cause great havoc in the midstream country. I do not mean China wants to do that, but at least we want to promote a better order on the Indian subcontinent where we always talk peace rather than wearing war on your lips.
Right. But coming back to this, Mr. Modi's visit to China, do you think there's a sincere attempt from India to rebuild relationship with China, or is it just to counter United States?
Well, my point is very simple. With or without the U.S. factor, China and India have all the incentives to improve their relations, put the territorial disputes behind it. I emphasized again and again that the McMahon line in the eastern section of China-Indian border, which was drawn up by Sir McMahon, who was not an Indian, he was a British. That line should never be taken as the border between China and India. China will never accept that. China will never agree with India that McMahon line should be the border between China and India. That means China and India need to really negotiate to for China to regain what we call South Tibet, territory to the south of the McMahon line, and India should acknowledge that it is futile for India to defend the McMahon line one way or another. Now, this may be very time-consuming. I even said if India wants to really take the McMahon line as the final border between China and India, I, Victor Gao, can draw a line along the Ganges. Territories to the north of the Ganges should not belong to India. And what will be the consequence for India, for example? So I think India will eventually, sooner or later, and I hope sooner rather than later, come to the conclusion that China and India should not be bound by this bad legacy left by the British colonial rulers in the Indian subcontinent, and we need to move on to create more goods for both the Chinese people and the Indian people. How far India wants to go in that direction, I do not know.
I ask you this
yes.
because same Indian media, where anti-China rhetoric was very popular till weeks ago, is now saying that after Prime Minister Modi's diplomatic masterstroke, President Trump is backing off from his tirade against India.
Well, if President Trump and the United States would have done that, I think that's a positive step in the right direction. After all, from the very beginning, I concluded that the U.S. tariff war against the rest of the world, including against China, is an illegal war. It's not legitimate. And fortunately, one of the appeals court in the United States declared that most of the policies the Trump administration launched against the rest of the world are not constitutional. They are not legal. So I think the ball is back in President Trump's court to how to justify for all these massive, unprecedented, illegal tariff initiatives against many countries, including against China, including against India. So sooner or later, I hope President Trump will need to figure out the other way rather than using maximum bullying against great countries like China or India or any other country. So if the United States would have reduced the tariffs against India as a reflection of better relations between China and India, that should be congratulated. I just hope India will really learn the lesson that the United States really does not treat India as a peer country. President Trump declared the Indian economy as a dead economy. They have no respect for India as a nation. That gives India greater incentive to reorient itself, to further improve its relations with Russia, to normalize its relations with China, and try to really continue onto an independent foreign policy, rather than allowing India to be used as a proxy by another big country.
Right. Now, let's talk about China and Pakistan relationship. Of course, both countries have strategic ties. CPEC has been going on for years now. And even on this visit, Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif and his delegation was there. Field Marshal Asim Munir was there. And now there are talks of further commitments of CPEC 2.0, investment coming from China to Pakistan. How do you see that?
Well, allow me to mention one point to start with. The CPEC project is the largest project within the BRI initiatives, involving the largest amount of investment, largest amount of mega projects altogether, for example. So I hope China and Pakistan, the Chinese people and the Pakistani people, will really appreciate the importance and the magnitude and the future impact of this CPEC project. Now, on the other hand, there have been quite a few of killing of the Chinese nationals in Pakistan, especially in Balochistan. Allow me to emphasize, each time when we lose any Chinese national, the whole country in China mourns the death of a Chinese national. So I hope China and Pakistan should really get our acts together to make sure that security and safety are absolutely assured, so that no loss of innocent Chinese life will be permitted again on the soil of Pakistan, especially in terms of Balochistan. So I think if we can do that, there will be more incentive in China from the government, from the military, from the corporate side, from people-to-people side, to really go to Pakistan more often, more freely, more assuredly, to make better investments, to conduct more corporate cooperations, etc. Because otherwise, if you cannot ensure security and safety of lives on the Chinese side, you really create an atmosphere which, allow me to say that, is not conducive for more business exchanges between our two countries. So my point is simple. Make sure that lives of the Chinese nationals working in Pakistan for the CPEC project will be absolutely protected.
Right. And this is important. And Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif in China, when he was talking to different delegations and investors, he was assuring them of foolproof securities. Now, there's a diplomatic issue as well, because both US and China are important for Pakistan. And Pakistan diplomatically always has to play a very balancing role. So what are the expectations of China from Pakistan in this regard?
Well, from the Chinese perspective, China and Pakistan are ironclad friends. We respect each other. We admire each other. And from the Chinese side, we have nothing, for example, which does not treat Pakistan as a true friend. Now, for Pakistan-American relations, it is very important. The decision is eventually up to Pakistan to decide. But allow me to mention one thing. Based on my worldly travel throughout the world and extensive exchanges with the American counterparts, I'm afraid in the United States, especially in certain circles, this Islamophobia still exists. That means they still do not feel comfortable in dealing with a great country like Pakistan, because Pakistan, after all, is a Muslim country, it's an Islamic country. And this Islamophobia is real. You should not just dismiss it. You should not just say, oh my God, with President Trump and his government, they are no longer focusing on the negative side. So my advice to the Pakistani people is always using your brain to come up with your own decision. And whatever decision you make, China will respect it. Is that right? But always protect yourself, because you do not want to suffer the vicissitude, the capriciousness, or the unpredictable turn of the events. Because for some of the projects, it's not an overnight project. It is, for example, investment for 10 years, for 20 years, if not even longer. So I think you need to really achieve a more balanced view about the rest of the world, and also acknowledge that China and Pakistan are really time-tested, true brothers and sisters. And we have all the reasons to be closer together, rather than, for example, anyone in Pakistan throwing a wedge into China-Pakistan solidarity.